From Syrian jihadi leader to rebel politician, how Abu al-Jolani reinvented himself. Did he though? Did he? If you say so, BBC, I still think he's a pot-bellied savage who I wouldn't trust to run a lemonade stand in my front garden, let alone a country. So it doesn't seem like this is going to go anywhere good. But as Syria's all popping off, and all the mainstream media do is lie, I thought I'd briefly fill you in about what's actually happening there in my own inimitable style. Funnier than Mike Graham, more impartial than Owen Jones, and noshed less teenagers off than Hugh Edwards. So, winner. Before we get started, I don't want any mention of the daft hat. I've been in California for several years now. I'm getting soft in my old age, and it's quite chilly early in the morning. Plus, I'm far too tight to turn the heating on, alright? So I'm keeping it. I'll read you the story, I'll sum up the situation, and I'll tell you why. The whole of the Western world is in serious bother thanks to the idiocy of the collection of brain-dead simpletons currently running the show. So this is from the BBC. Apparently, Mr. Al-Jolani has reinvented himself, and he's actually a splendid gentleman. There he is in an almost Christ-like post, getting waited on by very reasonable people in full-face balaclavas. Syrian rebel leader Mr. Al-Jolani has dropped the nom de guerre associated with his jihadi past and has started using his real name, Ahmed al-Sara, in official communiques since Thursday ahead of the fall of President Bashar al-Assad. He's changed his name, therefore we can trust him. Makes loads of sense. The move is part of Jolani's effort to bolster his legitimacy in a new context, as his militant group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, leading other rebel factions, announces the capture of the Syrian capital Damascus, solidifying its control over much of the country. Once clad in militant attire, he has adopted a more Western-style wardrobe in the past year. Now as he leads the offensive, he's donned military fatigue, symbolising his role as the commander of the operations room. But who is he? And how has he changed? I'll stop you there, BBC. Leopards don't change the spots. He hasn't changed, has he? Changing your name and changing your clothes doesn't make you a new person. I know that's very strange sounding, but it's true. If they let Ian Huntley out of prison and he started calling himself Bobby Smith and wearing a nice suit, would you let him mind the kids, would you? Well, people who work at the BBC probably would, because the average BBC employee is as thick as dehydrated whale spunk. But normal humans wouldn't, alright? Ian wouldn't be watching the kids, Harold Shippers wouldn't be looking after your granny, and Fred West wouldn't be doing your landscape gardening. It doesn't matter what they call themselves or what they wear, alright? Easy. Jolani was once linked to Al-Qaeda through the IS group's precursor, Al-Qaeda in Iraq. After the 2003 US-led invasion, he joined foreign fighters in Iraq. He was imprisoned at Camp Booker, where he enhanced his affiliations, and later on was introduced to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the quiet scholar who would later go on to lead IS. Quiet scholar. Yeah, when I think of quiet scholar, I think of some nerdy bloke or Isaac Newton or something. I don't think of a bloke famed for removing people's nappers with a meat cleaver. But the BBC's always done this. Always. Do you remember the famous one when they called a full-blown terrorist austere religious scholar? They won't call a spade, these people, because they're on the defensive for them. If you haven't figured this out by now, you're not paying attention. Let me just keep it simple for you. If they're on the victim pyramid, right, they can do no wrong. If a right-wing Baptist from Alabama says women should shut up and do as they're told and obey their husbands, and homosexuals are committing acts that are against God, people like me, being reasonable centrist chaps, say, I don't agree with that because I'm not religious and I don't believe in the monotheistic God, and I don't think he personally cares what I happen to put my cock in on a weekend. So I'm a moderate on that one. I'm not against the religious, and I'm not against women having jobs or gay men lubing up and enjoying themselves in the discotheques whilst ripped to the tits on wobbly eggs. I'm against neither of those things. But if a blonde fella from Alabama says either of those things, the lefty media, The Guardian, the BBC, Sky News, Channel 4, there'll be uproar. It will condemn them as bigoted, xenophobic hate preachers, and they will demand their head. But the second someone says the exact same two things, but they have a little bit of a beard and a wee bit of a tan, and have a name that has lots of ulls and acts and Baghdadis in it, then you won't hear a peep out of them. Then it's perfectly reasonable. It's their opinion. Everyone has to respect their religious opinion. Men are in charge of women by right of what God has given one over the other. Righteous women are devoutly obedient, and men should advise them, forsake them in bed, and then strike them. Yeah, if Justin Welby said anything like that, they'd have him castrated and then throw him in the sea. Anyway, moving on from the quiet scholar, in 2011, Baghdadi sent Jolani to Syria with funding to establish Al-Nusra Front, a covert faction tied to ISI. By 2012, it had become the prominent Syrian fighting force, hiding its IS and Al-Qaeda ties. If it hasn't sunk in yet, stone-cold killers are going to take over in Syria. And as I've told you a lot many times before, the real problem we have is being in love with the idea of a democracy in places that aren't ready for them. When tribalism reigns supreme, people don't vote like we vote. They don't just pick someone they like. Saddam Hussein kept a lid on Iraq, and he was good for the place because Saddam Hussein said to people, if you do any of this Sunni versus Shia nonsense, you get a bullet in the head and I'll bulldoze your house with your family still inside it. Did he kill a few thousand people every year? Of course he did. But did he have a functioning country as a result of it? Yes. The same can be said of Gaddafi and yes, Bashar al-Assad. Nothing good is going to come from this. Syria is now a total mess. It's a drug den. It's run by killers. Nobody in Europe's going to go back to Syria. Do you think that people are actually going to voluntarily leave and go back to Syria when they're on the state tit and they're getting free food and board, and they have done for a decade? If you think that, you're a raving lunatic. It's not happening. So nothing good's going to come of this. At this point, I was essentially as pro-Assad as Assad's mother and Assad's missus. I guarantee this is the start of a very turbulent time, not just in Syria, but for the rest of the West as well. It might kick off another migrant crisis. Nobody's going to go home. The whole country's going to turn into a drug den, exporting criminality all across the world. And as usual, the shit-for-brains people in the United Kingdom and the European Union on the left are all making out as if it's a fantastic day for democracy. They're not ready for democracy. They can't handle democracy. All right, they vote tribally. They'll do what they did in Gaza and elect lunatics who are obsessed with death. And changing your clothes and changing your name doesn't mean shit. And anyone who says otherwise, as I said, use my analogy. If Starmer says otherwise, let's get Ian out of prison, change his name by deed poll, and then see if him or Jess Phillips or Lisa Nandy or one of them or any of them planks in Parliament, let's see if they want to let him mind the kids because of a name change and a new set of clothes. But that's just what I think. As usual, nobody listens to me. That's why half the world's on fire. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you're convinced Syria's going to end up a paradise thanks to democracy, please let me know in the comments so I can laugh. I love reading the scribblings of imbeciles. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night. Toodle pip. Cheers.